Ever get that feeling like maybe, just maybe, you're not the absolute center of the universe?
Yeah, it kind of makes you want to chuckle, doesn't it?
Well, maybe, just maybe, that's your ego taking a little breather.
Ooh, interesting.
But what if we told you that harnessing that ego, yeah,
Yeah.
that very same ego, is actually the secret sauce to getting what you really want?
No, that's a twist.
Today, we're diving deep, deep, deep into Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday.
Ooh, Ryan Holiday. Love that guy. You know, what I really dig about Holiday's take is he doesn't just throw around theories, he goes right to the source.
What do you mean?
He looks at people who actually did incredible things, like William Tecumseh Sherman, Genghis Khan, Katharine Graham.
Oh, wow, those are some heavy hitters.
Exactly. These weren't just names in a history book. These were real people, flesh and blood, who wrestled with the same inner forces we all do.
Okay, so we're not talking about, like, rah-rah, your awesome self-esteem here.
Nope, not at all. This is about something way more, how should I put it? Slippery.
Sl-
Yeah, it's that voice inside that whispers, "You're special, you deserve more," even when it's dragging you down a rabbit hole.
Ooh, I know that voice.
Right. It's that constant craving for a pat on the back, that knee-jerk nope to any kind of feedback. That, my friend, is ego showing its teeth.
It's like that feeling you get right before you post that perfect picture on social media. You know, the one that makes your life look like a dream.
Bingo! Instead of buckling down and growing for real, we get snagged by this need to look good, to get those likes. We end up choosing appearances over substance. That, my friend, is ego at work.
And Holiday is saying this ego trap can snap at any point. Doesn't matter if you're just starting out, riding high on success, or even flat on your face.
It's true. And the fallout. Oh, it can be brutal. Take that initial spark of wanting something, that ambition, we're all fired up, ready to conquer the world, but ego can twist that into this cocky impatience.
So instead of putting in the work, we just want the trophy.
Exactly. We crave that instant recognition, that spotlight. We forget about the slow, steady climb to mastery.
Makes me think about that musician who got the boot from Metallica. He clearly had talent, but instead of using that setback to fuel his fire, he let it turn into bitterness.
Imagine how different things could have been if he'd focused on his craft, on learning from that experience, instead of letting ego call the shots. Talk about a missed opportunity.
Okay, so how about the people who actually navigated this tricky ego terrain? Like William Tecumseh Sherman, the Civil War guy.
Ah, Sherman. He was fascinating. This guy was a brilliant military mind, but he actually dodged promotions on purpose.
Wait, what? Turned down a promotion?
Yep. He knew that real leadership wasn't about stroking your ego. It was about grasping the situation and having the humility to keep learning. Always a student.
That's such a stark contrast to someone like General George B. McClellan. From what I've read, his ego basically led him to miss some big chances and make some pretty bad calls during the war.
McClellan is a prime example of how ego can trick you into thinking it's confidence. But it's really just a flimsy shield that crumbles under pressure.
So he was more worried about looking good than actually leading effectively.
Nailed it. He was so fixated on his image and reputation that he couldn't make the tough calls, the ones that might have ruffled some feathers but were necessary for real success.
Okay, so we've seen how ego can wreck our dreams and even our victories. But what happens when things go south? When we face a big fat failure, how does ego play into that?
That's when things get really dicey.
How so?
Because instead of letting us learn and grow from those stumbles, ego turns us into defensive, blame-shifting machines.
Makes sense. Admitting you messed up can feel like a pleat to the gut, right?
Big.
We'd rather protect our precious ego than actually get better.
Exactly. And that's where taming the ego comes in. Holiday lays out some killer strategies for breaking free from these ego-driven patterns. He says that by shifting our mindset and adopting certain practices, we can actually use those setbacks to power up our growth.
Wait, so instead of letting ego call the shots, we could actually use it to our advantage.
You got it. But the question is, how do we pull that off? How do we go from letting ego run the show to using it as a stepping stone?
Yeah, how do we actually do that?
Well, one of the most effective ways, and this might sound a little backward, is to embrace being a student, always learning.
Always learning, like never stop.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we never really arrive, that there's always more to discover, more to understand.
It's like that saying, everyone you meet knows something you don't.
Bingo.
Hmm.
It's about approaching life with a sense of curiosity, a willingness to learn from anyone, anywhere. The more we focus on soaking up knowledge, the less room there is for that I-know-it-all attitude.
I can see how that ties into taming the ego. But how do we actually cultivate that student mindset in our crazy busy lives? Any tips?
Holiday has a few. One is to actively seek out mentors and teachers, people who are a few steps ahead of us who can guide and support us. It's about recognizing that we don't have to go it alone.
Like having a plus minus equal in your life.
Yeah.
Someone to learn from, someone to teach, and someone to push you.
That's it. That's mixed martial arts champ Frank Shamrock's approach, and it's a powerful way to knock down that ego and keep growing. But even with awesome mentors, learning can feel overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes you hit that learning curve and you're like, whoa, am I ever going to get this?
Right. And that feeling of being intimidated, well, that's prime time for ego's defense mechanisms to kick in. And that's where another one of Holiday strategies comes in, restraint. Learning to control our knee-jerk reactions, especially when things get tough, is crucial.
So instead of freaking out or getting defensive, we take a breath and think it through.
Exactly. It's not about ignoring our emotions, but choosing how and when to express them.
So think before you react.
Got it. Think about Jackie Robinson breaking into Major League Baseball. He faced unbelievable racism and hostility, yet he chose to respond with strength and dignity. He knew that giving in to his ego, lashing out, would have sabotaged his mission. His restraint, his ability to see the bigger picture, allowed him to achieve something truly remarkable.
So even when you're provoked, choosing restraint over an ego-driven reaction can actually be a force for positive change.
You got it. Sometimes the most powerful move is to not move at all. And it's something we can apply in our everyday lives, whether it's dealing with a difficult boss, a frustrating project, or just a bad day. Choosing restraint over ego lets us stay focused on what truly matters and make progress towards our goals.
Okay, I'm digging these strategies. Becoming a student, practicing restraint. What else does Holiday offer for keeping ego in check?
This is where things get really interesting. He throws out a strategy that might seem a little out there. Love.
Love. Not exactly the first thing that comes to mind when you think about battling ego.
I know, right? It might seem surprising, but think about it. Ego is all about me, myself, and I. Love, on the other hand, is about connection, compassion, and understanding. It's about putting something besides yourself at the center of your universe.
So in a way, love is like ego's kryptonite.
Exactly. It shifts our focus outward, helping us see beyond our own limited perspective.
And that makes us more resilient when we hit those inevitable roadblocks.
Totally. It's about understanding that everyone's fighting their own battles and that responding with love and understanding instead of judgment and anger is way more productive.
This reminds me of the whole Orson Welles and Citizen Kane situation. William Randolph Hearst, who thought the film was about him, went all out to sabotage it. Talk on an ego trip.
Classic example of ego gone wild. Hearst had it all: money, power, influence. But he was so obsessed with his image that he wasted a ton of energy trying to control how people saw him. And guess what? It backfired big time. His efforts only made the film more legendary and cemented his reputation as a controlling tyrant.
Oh, the irony. Trying to control the narrative often leads to the opposite outcome.
You said it. Now look at Wells. He could have easily been consumed by bitterness, but he kept creating, focused on his art, and let go of the need to control the story. His love for his craft, his commitment to his vision, allowed him to rise above the drama.
So focusing on what we love, what truly matters to us, can be a powerful way to overcome ego and find lasting satisfaction. But this whole taming the ego thing, it sounds like a constant struggle, doesn't it? Like you never really win for good.
It's definitely a lifelong journey. The battle with ego never really ends. It's something we have to be constantly aware of, constantly working to manage.
So it's not about reaching some perfect state of egolessness.
Not at all. It's about developing the self-awareness to recognize when ego is calling the shots and then making a conscious choice to do something different.
Before we move on, I'm curious about one last strategy Holiday talks about: defining our values and purpose. Why is this so important in the fight against ego?
Oh, this is huge because when we know what we stand for, what we believe in, and what we're working towards, it's so much easier to tune out the noise of ego. It's like having a compass that keeps us on course even when things get rough.
So it's about having that inner guide that helps us navigate the ups and downs of life.
Think about Katharine Graham taking over the Washington Post after her husband passed away. She faced incredible pressure, but she kept going by focusing on her responsibilities and what truly mattered to her, protecting her family's legacy and upholding the paper's integrity.
It would have been so easy to walk away, given everything she'd been through.
Absolutely. But her strong sense of purpose, Her commitment to something bigger than herself allowed her to navigate those tough times and ultimately achieve incredible success.
So defining our values and purpose gives us a framework for making decisions, even when ego is tempting us with easier, more self-serving options.
You got it. It provides strength and resilience that helps us resist those temptations and stay focused on what truly matters.
This has been a truly eye-opening dive into the world of ego and its impact on our lives. Before we wrap up, I'd love for you to leave our listeners with one last thought, something to ponder, something to inspire them on their own journey of taming the ego.
Let me think for a second. How about this? Okay, so picture this.
Okay.
You're cruising along, feeling pretty good about yourself.
Yeah.
Then bam, you hit a wall, a setback, a major fail.
Oof, I've been there.
And that's when ego can really rear its ugly head.
Oh yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Instead of being like, okay, what can I learn from this?
Right.
Ego flips the script and says, nope, not my fault. Got to protect my image.
It's like that feeling of wanting to point fingers at everyone else but yourself.
Exactly. It's all about self-preservation, keeping that shiny facade intact, even if it means missing out on a chance to actually grow.
So we end up stuck, repeating the same mistakes, all because we can't handle looking bad.
And that's where the whole idea of taming the ego comes in.
Taming the ego. Sounds kind of intense.
It can be, but it's so worth it.
So how do we actually do it? How do we go from letting ego run the show to actually using it as fuel for growth?
Well, one of the most powerful strategies, and this might sound a little counterintuitive, is to cultivate a mindset of continuous learning, what Holiday calls becoming a student.
Always be learning, huh? Sounds familiar.
It's about acknowledging that we never really arrive, that there's always more to discover, more to understand.
Love that. Makes me think of that saying, everyone you meet knows something you don't.
Exactly. It's about approaching life with a sense of curiosity and humility, recognizing that every interaction, every experience holds the potential for learning and growth.
So it's about being open to new information, new perspectives, even if they challenge our current beliefs.
Precisely. And think about someone like Genghis Khan.
Genghis Khan, the fierce warrior, what's he got to do with being a student?
Well, history often paints him as this ruthless conqueror, right?
Yeah, kind of a barbarian sweeping across Asia and Europe, leaving destruction in his wake.
And while there's definitely truth to that, what's often overlooked is that Khan was also a brilliant strategist and a lifelong learner.
Really? I never thought of him that way.
He was constantly seeking to understand the cultures he encountered, adapting his strategies, and even incorporating the best ideas from his enemies.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
He knew that true power wasn't about brute force, but about continuous learning and adaptation.
So it wasn't just about conquering and dominating.
Nope, it was about absorbing knowledge, constantly expanding his understanding of the world.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this ties into taming the ego.
The more you're focused on learning and growing, the less likely you are to get caught up in your own self-importance.
So how do we actually cultivate this student mindset? Any practical tips?
One of the best ways is to actively seek out mentors and teachers.
People who have been there, done that?
Exactly. People who are further along the path than we are, who can offer guidance and support.
It's like having that plus minus equal in your life, right?
Yeah.
Someone to learn from, someone to teach, and someone to challenge you.
That's the idea. That's mixed martial arts champion Frank Shamrock's approach, and it's a powerful way to break down ego and foster continuous growth.
I like it. So finding mentors can help us stay humble and keep learning.
Absolutely. But even with great mentors, the learning process can feel overwhelming sometimes, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
We might hit a steep learning curve, start doubting our abilities, and wonder if we'll ever catch up.
That feeling of being totally out of your depth can definitely trigger those ego defenses.
For sure. And that's where another one of Holiday's strategies comes in. Restraint.
Restraint, like holding back.
It's about learning to control our emotions and impulses, especially when faced with adversity.
So not letting our emotions run wild.
It's not about suppressing them altogether, but about choosing how and when to express them.
Responding thoughtfully rather than reacting impulsively.
Exactly. Think about Jackie Robinson working into Major League Baseball.
Incredible story.
He faced unbelievable racism and hostility, yet he chose to respond with strength and dignity, not with anger and retaliation.
He was a true pioneer.
He understood that giving into his ego, lashing out at his tormentors, would have ultimately undermined his mission.
He had to rise above.
His restraint, His ability to focus on the bigger picture allowed him to achieve something truly groundbreaking.
Wow, what a powerful example.
And it's a strategy we can apply in our own lives.
Even in everyday situations.
Absolutely. Whether we're dealing with a difficult boss, a frustrating project, or just a bad day.
So instead of blowing up or getting defensive, we take a step back and think things through.
Choosing a restraint over ego-driven reactions allows us to stay focused on what truly matters and make progress toward our goals.
Okay, I'm really digging these strategies.
Yeah.
Becoming a student, practicing restraint. What else does Holiday have up his sleeve?
Well, this one might throw you for a loop.
Oh, lay it on me.
He suggests a strategy that might seem a little out there. Love.
Love. Now, that's not what I expected.
I know, right? It might seem a little strange at first, but hear me out.
Okay, I'm listening.
Ego is all about self-preservation, self-promotion, self-importance.
Me, myself, and I.
Exactly. But love is about connection, compassion, understanding.
It's about putting something other than yourself at the center.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected, that everyone is fighting their own battles.
So in a way, love is the antidote to ego.
You could say that. It helps us shift our focus outward, allowing us to see beyond our own limited perspective.
And that can make us more resilient when things get tough.
Absolutely. When we approach challenges and setbacks with love and understanding, rather than judgment and anger, we're much better equipped to handle them.
It's like choosing compassion over criticism.
And think about what happens when we respond with love instead of ego.
What do you mean?
Well, think about Orson Welles and the backlash he faced for Citizen Kane.
Yes, the whole William Randolph Hearst debacle.
Hearst, who believed the film was based on his life, went to extraordinary lengths to sabotage it.
That's some serious ego at play.
Hearst had wealth, power, influence, but he was so consumed by his image that he spent an enormous amount of energy trying to control how he was perceived by the world.
Talk about a control freak.
And guess what? It completely backfired.
Karma, right.
His efforts only solidified the film's legacy and ultimately cemented his own reputation as a tyrannical figure.
It's funny how trying to control the narrative often leads to the opposite outcome.
The irony is not lost on me.
So what about Wells? How did he handle all this?
He could have easily been consumed by bitterness and resentment, but he chose a different path.
The high road.
He continued creating, focused on his art, and ultimately let go of the need to control the narrative.
He didn't let ego dictate his actions.
His love for his craft, his commitment to his vision, allowed him to rise above the drama.
Powerful stuff.
It's a reminder that focusing on what we love, what truly matters to us, can be a powerful way to overcome ego and achieve lasting fulfillment.
So it's not about achieving some perfect state of egolessness.
Not at all. It's about finding that balance, that sweet spot where we can harness the power of ego without letting it run the show.
Sounds like a lifelong journey.
It is, but it's a journey worth taking. So how about this? What if, for everything that comes next in your life, ego is the enemy?
Ooh, that's a powerful thought.
Right. It makes you pause and think about all the ways ego can sneak in and trip us up.
Especially as we're trying to move forward and achieve our goals.
Because ego, it's a master of disguise.
What do you mean?
It can lull us into complacency, make us resistant to feedback, even blind us to opportunities that don't fit our inflated self-image.
So it's not just about reaching a certain level of success, it's about sustaining it.
And navigating those inevitable bumps in the road with grace and wisdom, not letting ego sabotage us along the way.
So it's an ongoing battle, a constant awareness of those ego-driven tendencies.
Exactly. Like that metaphor of sweeping the floor. Just because we've cleaned up our ego once doesn't mean it won't get dusty again.
We got to stay vigilant, even when we think we've got it all figured out.
It's a practice, a lifelong journey of self-awareness and course correction.
And it's not about becoming some perfect, egoless being.
Right, not at all. That's not realistic or even desirable. A healthy ego can be a source of confidence and motivation.
So it's about finding that balance, harnessing the power of ego without letting it take over.
Exactly. It's like a dance, a delicate balance between self-belief and humility. And if our listeners are ready to start that dance, Ryan Holiday's Ego is the Enemy is an awesome place to begin.
It's packed with insights and practical tips for taming the ego and living a more fulfilling life.
But here's a final thought for you all to chew on.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Think back to a time in your life when ego might have held you back, maybe even tripped you up.
Ouch, I think we've all been there.
Now ask yourself, what could you have done differently? How can you apply what we've talked about today to your current challenges and aspirations?
It's about recognizing those ego-driven patterns and making a conscious choice to break free.
Because remember, you are not your work, your successes, or your failures.
Those are just experiences, not definitions of who we are.
Separating our identity from those external things allows us to approach life with more resilience, clarity, and purpose.
It's about recognizing our inherent worth, regardless of our achievements or setbacks.
That's the essence of it. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep that ego in check.
Fantastic advice. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into taming the ego.
It's been a pleasure, as always.
We'll catch you next time for another deep dive into the ideas that shape our lives.